Question 1. You're preparing for arrival at a Class C airport and are assigned a STAR, Standard Terminal Arrival Route. The STAR includes several crossing altitude restrictions and an instruction to descend via. To comply with the clearance, you must understand what descend via authorizes you to do, which statement best describes what descend via permits under IFR. A begin descent at pilot's discretion, but remain at or above all published restrictions. B. Descend along the lateral path of the STAR without following altitude restrictions. C. Descend vertically and laterally according to the published STAR routing and restrictions without further ATC clearance. D. Descend only when specifically cleared to a lower altitude regardless of STAR restrictions. Correct answer. C. Descend vertically and laterally according to the published STAR routing and restrictions without further ATC clearance. Explanation. Descend via is a specific IFR clearance, granting a pilot the authority to navigate both the lateral and vertical profiles of a STAR. This means the pilot must comply with published route paths, altitude, and speed restrictions without further prompting from ATC. This concept is governed by the FAA's AIM 541 and FAA Order 7110.65, which stipulate that the clearance implies adherence to all constraints shown on the STAR. Misinterpreting this phrase can result in regulatory violations and compromised separation. Question 2. During a circling approach to runway 18 at night with reported visibility at minimums and strong crosswinds from the west, you begin your maneuver from a straighten approach to runway 36. Based on standard circling techniques, which action ensures safe execution and compliance with IFR circling standards. A descend below MDA to improve runway visibility if terrain clearance appears adequate. B. Remain within the circling protected area. Maintain MDA until aligned with final, and adjust bank angle for wind drift. C. Initiate descent immediately after passing the threshold to prepare for a quick final turn. D. Fly a tight base to final to reduce exposure time during maneuvering near the airport. Correct answer. B. Remain within the circling protected area. Maintain MDA until aligned with final, and adjust bank angle for wind drift. Explanation. Circling approaches must be executed with extreme caution, particularly at night and in adverse wind conditions. Pilots are required to remain within the circling protected area and maintain the minimum descent altitude, MDA, until they are in a position to make a normal descent to landing. The FAA's Instrument Procedures Handbook and AIM dictate maintaining obstacle clearance by respecting the lateral confines of the circling approach and adjusting for drift. Early descent or maneuvering too tightly increases risk of CFIT, controlled flight into terrain, especially in unfamiliar or complex terrain. Question 3. Captain Melanie Roberts is flying a single-pilot IFR operation on a long cross-country trip. After several hours in instrument meteorological conditions, IMC, she begins to experience fatigue and minor spatial disorientation. Despite the autopilot being engaged, she finds herself struggling to maintain situational awareness and is becoming overwhelmed. As the pilot in command, which decision-making strategy is most appropriate under these conditions? A. Disengage the autopilot and switch to raw data flying to improve engagement and reduce reliance on automation. B. Declare an emergency immediately and request priority handling due to fatigue-related impairment. C. Use the IMSAFE checklist, communicate the situation to ATC, and consider diverting to a nearby alternate to ensure safety. D. Continue as planned, relying on autopilot and caffeine to mitigate fatigue until the final approach phase. Correct answer. C. Use the IMSAFE checklist, communicate the situation to ATC, and consider diverting to a nearby alternate to ensure safety. Explanation. This scenario highlights a common challenge in IFR operations: fatigue and degraded cognitive performance. Applying aeronautical decision-making (ADM) and the IMSAFE checklist, illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, emotion, is critical for maintaining safety. The FAA prioritizes proactive risk management, and diverting due to pilot impairment is an acceptable, even encouraged, response. FAR 91.3a also supports pilot and command authority to deviate from rules if required for safety. Communicating the issue to ATC ensures cooperative assistance while reducing cognitive workload. Question 4. When preparing for an IFR flight to a destination with only a non-precision approach and forecast weather is marginal, you consider alternate requirements. The TAF for the destination airport predicts 3 SM visibility and a broken ceiling at 800 feet. There are no precision approaches at the destination. Based on this pre-flight planning scenario, under which condition are you required to file an alternate airport? You are required to file an alternate because a non-precision approach requires at least 800 to forecast weather. B. No alternate is required as the visibility is greater than 3 miles and the ceiling is above 800 feet. C. An alternate is required only if the forecast visibility is less than the approach visibility minimums. D. An alternate is not required as long as ATC has radar coverage for the airport. Correct answer. You are required to file an alternate because a non-precision approach requires at least 800 to forecast weather. Explanation. Per FAR 91.169, when no instrument approach is available, or if forecast weather is below 800 feet ceiling and 2 SM visibility for a non-precision approach within 1 hour before to 1 hour after the estimated time of arrival, filing an alternate is required. Since the destination has only non-precision approaches and the forecast is 800 BKN and 3 SM, it meets the ceiling but not visibility, meaning it just meets the minimums, but for safer and legal compliance, filing an alternate is recommended. If either element dips below the threshold, an alternate is mandatory. Always apply conservative planning and legal compliance. Question 5. You are flying an FR-certified aircraft equipped with a dual VOR setup and DME. After tuning into a VOR station, the CDI shows full deflection even though you are within range. You verify the correct frequency, volume, and ident. What should be your next step in troubleshooting the navigation equipment under instrument flight? Attempt a second VOR frequency nearby to confirm receiver performance. B. Notify ATC and continue navigating using GPS if available. C. Assume station failure and file a PIREP. D. Continue flying based on heading until a radial intercept occurs. Correct answer. Attempt a second VOR frequency nearby to confirm receiver performance. Explanation. If the CDI is fully deflected, despite being in range and having audible station ID, it's critical to determine whether the issue is with the aircraft's receiver or the VOR station itself. By tuning into another VOR within range, you can troubleshoot whether the aircraft's equipment is faulty. If the second VOR functions correctly, the issue likely lies with the original station, and you should file a PIREP and notify ATC. This step is aligned with FAA AIM 113 and 118, covering VOR service volumes and pilot responsibilities in the event of suspected navigation failure. Jumping to conclusions could result in inappropriate flight decisions. Question 6. Captain David Lee is flying an ILS approach into an airport in IMC. Just before reaching the decision altitude DA, a layer of fog rolls across the runway, reducing visibility significantly. He executes a missed approach, but during the initial climb, ATC instructs him to fly a heading that deviates from the published missed approach procedure. Which of the following actions best demonstrates correct IFR procedures? A. Refuse the ATC instruction, because pilots must always fly the published missed approach first. B. Comply with ATC instructions, since they can modify missed approach procedures for traffic and separation. C. Fly the published missed approach, and then request a new clearance once in holding. D. Descend to the MDA and attempt a circling approach to the same runway if visibility improves. Correct answer. B. Comply with ATC instructions, since they can modify missed approach procedures for traffic and separation. Explanation. Under FAR 91.185 and AIM 5421, ATC has the authority to issue alternative missed approach instructions, especially when traffic or airspace requirements dictate. The published missed approach procedure applies only when no instructions are given or radio contact is lost. If ATC provides a heading or altitude different from the published procedure, the pilot must comply. Safety and legal operation depend on understanding that ATC separation and flow management override the standard profile during controlled communication. Deviating without ATC coordination would be a violation. Question 7. During an IFR flight, you experience a failure of your pitot-static system. While the airspeed indicator, altimeter, and VSI have all become unreliable, you still have attitude and heading reference information. What is the most appropriate action to maintain IFR flight? A. Immediately request a clearance to descend below the MEA to troubleshoot safely. B. Continue the flight using attitude and heading references, and request vectors if needed. C. Declare an emergency and begin a precautionary landing at the nearest airport. D. Turn off all electrical equipment to attempt to reset the system. Correct answer. B. Continue the flight using attitude and heading references and request vectors if needed. Explanation. In the event of pitot-static failure, you must rely on gyroscopic instruments' attitude, heading for control and maintain spatial orientation. Declaring an emergency or diverting is situational, but continuing IFR under ATC guidance is generally safe if controllability is maintained. FAR 91.187 also mandates notifying ATC of system failures. Question 8. Which of the following is not a requirement for logging IFR currency under 14 CFR Section 61(57)(c)? A. At least 6 instrument approaches within the preceding 6 calendar months. B. Holding procedures and tasks. C. Intercepting and tracking courses through the use of navigation systems. D. Conducting at least 1 hour of simulated IMC in the past 90 days. Correct answer. D. Conducting at least 1 hour of simulated IMC in the past 90 days. Explanation. While A, B, and C are listed requirements for maintaining IFR currency, D is not. Simulated IMC time alone does not satisfy instrument currency requirements. The focus is on approach and navigation procedures, not total time in simulated IMC. Question 9. You are preparing for a flight and identify that your static system check 91.411 is 26 months old. You plan to file and fly IFR. What are your options? A. Proceed since it's within the 30-day tolerance for instrument checks. B. Proceed only in VMC and request to stay in Class E airspace. C. You cannot fly IFR without a current 24-month static system certification. D. Proceed if you're using a certified WAAS GPS, as the static system is not required. Correct answer. C. You cannot fly IFR without a current 24-month static system certification. Explanation. FAR 91.411 requires a static system test within 24 calendar months for IFR operations in controlled airspace. An expired test invalidates your IFR status, regardless of GPS capabilities or weather. Question 10. An instrument-rated pilot is planning a night IFR flight to an airport that has only GPS-based RNAV approaches. What must the pilot ensure about the aircraft? The aircraft must have dual VOR receivers in case GPS fails. B. The aircraft must be equipped with a WAAS-capable GPS or approved alternate means of navigation. C. The aircraft must file an alternate regardless of weather. D. The aircraft must have a TSOC-129 receiver and autopilot for LNAV tracking. Correct answer. B. The aircraft must be equipped with a WAAS-capable GPS or approved alternate means of navigation. Explanation. Per AIM and FAA AC 9100A, if relying on GPS exclusively for approaches, the equipment must be WAAS-capable, TSO C145 C146, or a non-GPS alternate approach must be available at the destination or alternate airport. TSO C129, non-WAAS, requires alternate means of navigation. Question 11. Scenario. Captain Alina is conducting an IPC in a G1000 equipped aircraft. During the precision approach segment, the autopilot malfunctions and she manually flies the approach but fails to intercept the glide slope. The DPE asks why she didn't initiate a missed approach. What would be the correct reason under the instrument ACS standards? The approach was still legal since she was in visual conditions. B. A missed approach is not required if lateral guidance is established. C. Failure to intercept glide slope before DA requires a missed approach under ACS. D. It's acceptable during IPCs to continue descent as long as altitude is safe. Correct answer. C. Failure to intercept glide slope before DA requires a missed approach under ACS. Explanation. According to the instrument ACS and FAA guidance, failure to intercept glide slope before decision altitude DA on a precision approach necessitates a missed approach. Even in VMC, IFR procedures are to be executed precisely during IPC evaluations. Question 12. Which of the following best describes the difference between proficiency and currency? A currency ensures safety. Proficiency ensures legality. B. Currency is required by regulation. Proficiency is a subjective measure of skill. C. Proficiency and currency are interchangeable terms in IFR flight. D. Proficiency can only be determined by a flight instructor. Correct answer. B. Currency is required by regulation. Proficiency is a subjective measure of skill. Explanation. Currency, e.g., Section 61, 57, refers to legal minimum requirements to fly IFR. Proficiency relates to pilot skill and decision-making ability, which may exceed legal minimums. A proficient pilot may be safer, even if technically not current, and vice versa. Question 13. While flying IFR at night in IMC, you notice a rapidly increasing descent rate and decreasing airspeed, but all instruments are indicating normal readings. What is the most likely cause? A pitot tube icing. B. Block static port. C. Gyro failure. D. Autopilot disconnect. Correct answer, a pitot tube icing. Explanation. Pitot tube icing can cause the airspeed indicator to underread as ice blocks the RAM air input. This can lead to misinterpretation of descent performance. It's critical to use pitot heat in visible moisture under IFR as per 91.205. Question 14. Which of the following is true regarding GPS RAIM availability before a planned IFR flight? A WAAS GPS eliminates the need for RAIM prediction. B. RAIM prediction is only needed for Class A airspace. C. You must verify RAIM availability for the destination airport only. D. RAIM prediction is automatic and not the pilot's responsibility. Correct answer. A WAAS GPS eliminates the need for RAIM prediction. Explanation. RAIM, Receiver Autonomous Integrity Monitoring, is required for TSOC 129 GPS. WAAS-equipped systems, TSOC 145-146, self-monitor integrity and don't require manual RAIM checks. However, for non-WAAS units, pilots must use FAA RAIM prediction tools. Question 15. Scenario. You're planning an IFR cross-country flight that ends with a planned RNAV GPS approach using LNAV minimums. Your GPS is non-WAAS and certified under TSOC 129. You check RAIM availability and find a predicted outage during your arrival window. How should you proceed? A. Delay the departure until the RAIM outage clears. B. File an alternate with a non-GPS-based approach and ensure it meets alternate criteria. C. Continue as planned because LNAV doesn't require RAIM if you're using Barrow VNav. D. Use visual approach procedures instead since it's expected to be VFR. Correct answer. B. File an alternate with a non-GPS-based approach and ensure it meets alternate criteria. Explanation. For TSOC 129 non-WAAS GPS units, RAIM prediction is mandatory. If RAIM is unavailable during the estimated time of arrival at your destination, you must file an alternate airport with an approach that doesn't require GPS, per FAA AC 90-100A. You must also have the necessary equipment to fly that approach. Question 16. Which of the following statements is true regarding IFR alternates under 14 CFR Section 91-169? An alternate is always required for night IFR. B. An alternate is not required if the forecast weather at the destination is at least 1,000 feet ceiling and 3 miles visibility for plus or minus 2 hours of ETA. C. Alternates are not required if a GPS approach is planned and weather is above LNAV minimums. D. An alternate is required unless the departure and destination airports are within 100 nautical miles. Correct answer. B. An alternate is not required if the forecast weather at the destination is at least 1,000 feet ceiling and 3 miles visibility for plus or minus 2 hours of ETA. Explanation. The 123 rule from 14 CFR Section 91-169 states that an alternate is not needed if, for at least 1 hour before and 1 hour after the ETA, the ceiling is at least 2,000 feet and visibility is at least 3 sm. Any lower conditions mandate filing an alternate. Question 17. What is the required equipment for IFR operations under 14 CFR Section 91-205D? A. Radios, PIDOT heat, turn coordinator and at least 1 VOR. B. All standard day VFR instruments plus generator alternator, gyroscopic pitch bank heading indicators, and navigation for the route. C. Only GPS and attitude indicator if flying under RNAV routes. D. Autopilot, 2 communication radios and backup battery system. Correct answer. B. All standard day VFR instruments plus generator alternator, gyroscopic pitch bank heading indicators, and navigation for the route. Explanation. IFR flight requires all instruments for VFR day, plus additional ones: gyroscopic attitude, heading, turn coordinator, sensitive altimeter, PIDOT heat, and navigation communication suitable for the route. GPS isn't mandatory if flying conventional navigation routes. Question 18. When flying an ILS approach, what does the term decision altitude, DA, refer to? A. The minimum altitude to begin descent to the runway. B. The height at which the approach becomes visual. C. The altitude where you must either continue to land or execute a missed approach. D. The minimum visibility required to land. Correct answer. C. The altitude where you must either continue to land or execute a missed approach. Explanation. DA is the specified altitude in a precision approach where the pilot must make a decision. Either continue the approach if the required visual references are available or initiate a missed approach. It replaces the older decision height terminology in some approaches. Question 19. In an IFR en route scenario, you're given the clearance. Hold west of the ABC VOR on the 270 radial, right turns. Expect further clearance at 1430. How should you enter the hold if approaching from the north? A. Direct entry. B. Parallel entry. C. Teardrop entry. D. Holding entries are pilot discretion. Any method is acceptable. Correct answer. A direct entry. Explanation. When approaching from the north toward the holding fix on the 270 radial with right turns, a direct entry is the simplest and most appropriate. This type of entry is within the standard 70-degree sector for direct entry under AIM guidelines. Question 20. Scenario. You're executing a missed approach from an ILS and ATC instructs you to fly heading 360, climb and maintain 3000. What do? A. Follow the missed approach procedure as published, then contact ATC. B. Fly the assigned heading and altitude, disregarding the published procedure. C. Climb on runway heading to 3000, then request clarification. D. Maintain heading 360, but climb per the published missed approach. Correct answer. B. Fly the assigned heading and altitude, disregarding the published procedure. Explanation. Once ATC issues a new missed approach clearance, it supersedes the published procedure. You follow ATC's heading and altitude unless unable to do so safely, e.g., terrain conflict. Always clarify if unsure. Question 21. Which statement best describes how to determine if an RNAV route or approach can be flown legally? Any RNAV procedure can be flown if the pilot is IFR certified. B. Only RNAV approaches with RNP in the title require WAAS. C. The aircraft must be equipped and certified for RNAV operations per the chart's equipment requirements. D. RNAV routes and approaches are unrestricted as long as GPS is working. Correct answer. C. The aircraft must be equipped and certified for RNAV operations per the chart's equipment requirements. Explanation. RNAV charts and approaches have specific equipment requirements. For example, some require RNP 0.3 capability or WAAS-certified GPS. Pilots must ensure aircraft certification and authorization align with the procedure. See AC 9100A and 9105D. Question 22. Which of the following is a requirement for a standard IFR alternate airport? A. At least one approach procedure must be published for the airport. B. The airport must have a control tower and 24/7 weather reporting. C. The airport must be within 50 nm of the destination. D. The airport must have both ILS and RNAV approaches available. Correct answer. A. At least one approach procedure must be published for the airport. Explanation. A legal IFR alternate must have an instrument approach procedure available, and the forecast weather at ETA must meet alternate weather minimums, e.g., 602 for precision or 802 for non-precision approaches per Section 91. 169. Question 23. When are you required to report a loss of navigational capability to ATC? Only when operating in Class A airspace. B. Anytime required navigation equipment fails in IFR conditions. C. Only if the loss affects the primary GPS. D. Never. ATC will automatically reroute you. Correct answer. B. Anytime required navigation equipment fails in IFR conditions. Explanation. Under FAR Section 91, 187, you must immediately notify ATC of any malfunction of navigational, approach, or communication equipment while operating under IFR. This helps ensure safety and proper separation services. Question 24. Which of the following best describes the difference between MEA and MOCA? MEA ensures terrain clearance only. MOCA provides signal coverage. B. MEA guarantees obstacle clearance and nav aid reception. MOCA ensures obstacle clearance but may not provide signal coverage beyond 22 nm. C. MOCA is only applicable in mountainous terrain. D. MEA applies to RNAV routes only. Correct answer. B. MEA guarantees obstacle clearance and nav aid reception. MOCA ensures obstacle clearance but may not provide signal coverage beyond 22 nm. Explanation. MOCA guarantees at least 1,000 feet of terrain clearance, 2,000 in mountainous terrain, and VOR reception within 22 nm. MEA provides both terrain clearance and reliable nav aid reception over the entire route. Question 25. In the event of lost communication in IMC, which route should you follow according to 91-185C? 1. The route filed in your flight plan. B. The route ATC last cleared you on. C. The route assigned in your last ATC clearance. D. The most direct route to the destination airport. Correct answer. C. The route assigned in your last ATC clearance. Explanation. The hierarchy under FAR 91.185 is assigned right arrow expected filed AVEF. So, fly the route assigned in your last clearance. If none was assigned, then fly the route ATC expected you to fly, and if none was expected, fly your filed route. Question 26. What is the purpose of a feeder route on an approach chart? A. It provides alternate missed approach options. B. It connects the en route structure to the initial approach fix, IAF. C. It transitions from the final approach to the airport environment. D. It is used only for SIDs and stars. Correct answer. B. It connects the en route structure to the initial approach fix, IAF. Explanation. Feeder routes bring the pilot from the en route airway system to the IAF, ensuring obstacle clearance and navigation capability. They are published on approach plates and simplify transitioning to the approach phase. Question 27. Scenario. While flying in IMC and assigned to hold at a fix, you inadvertently enter the hold in the wrong direction. ATC does not notice. What is the consequence? A. You violated FAR 91.183 and must report yourself. B. No action is required unless a loss of separation occurs or ATC intervenes. C. You must immediately declare an emergency. D. You must request radar vectors to re-enter the hold correctly. Correct answer. B. No action is required unless a loss of separation occurs or ATC intervenes. Explanation. While procedural compliance is important, incorrect hold entry alone is not a violation unless it results in a loss of separation or contradicts a specific clearance. Still, correct entry is expected per AIM. Question 28. What is the meaning of an underlined procedure name on an instrument approach chart? A. The procedure must be flown without radar. B. The approach cannot be used as an alternate. C. Radar is required to fly the approach. D. ADF or DME is mandatory for the approach. Correct answer. C. Radar is required to fly the approach. Explanation. If an approach procedure title is underlined, radar is required for all or part of the approach, e.g., transitions, step-down fixes. This limitation is highlighted to inform pilots of required ATC services. Question 29. Which of the following statements about holding pattern leg lengths is correct? A. Inbound legs are always 1 minute, regardless of altitude. B. At or below 14,000 feet MSL, inbound legs should be 1 minute. C. Above 14,000 feet MSL, holding legs should be 1.5 minutes inbound only if DME is available. D. Holding leg lengths are always 1.5 minutes outbound. Correct answer. B. At or below 14,000 feet MSL, inbound legs should be 1 minute. Explanation. According to the AIM, holding leg lengths are 1 minute at or below 14,000 feet and 1.5 minutes above 14,000 feet. This timing is for the inbound leg, adjusted by the pilot using wind correction. Question 30. Which of the following is a true statement regarding instrument approach procedures? A. You may descend below MDA or DA when you see the VASI or PAPI. B. You may descend below MDA-DA only when required visual references are in sight and descent to land can be made using normal maneuvers. C. You can descend below DA if the airport beacon is visible. D. Descent below DA is allowed if terrain is no longer visible below you. Correct answer. B. You may descend below MDA-DA only when required visual references are in sight and descent to land can be made using normal maneuvers. Explanation. FAR 91.175 clearly outlines that a descent below MDA or DA is only permitted when the required visual references, runway environment, lights, threshold, etc., are in sight, and a safe descent can be made using standard maneuvers.